Hello everyone, it is time to meet our next team getting ready for VCT Ascension Pacific 2024. There's only two teams remaining, the two teams that represent the two regions that got first and second seed last year, or first and second place rather, of last year's Ascension tournament. So that will be the Malaysia and Singapore MYSG region and of course the Japanese region. So which team will we cover first between the two? It is going to be the one you've all been waiting for. It's Disguised. Before we get, deep into meeting the players and whatnot of Disguised itself, let's paint the picture a little bit for MYSG. So, if you followed Pacific or Asian Valorant at all, MYSG has kind of been at the forefront. I mean, it's been in your face whether you knew it or not, because Paper X used to represent the MYSG region. They still do within Pacific, but they used to obviously go through the challenger scene in that region. And then it was the MYSG region winning Ascension Pacific last year. Revenant Esports, representing the MYSG region, wins first place, gets their spot into VCT Pacific. So there is a lot of history that this region has always had the best team of, APAC, of Pacific Valorant when it comes to the challenger scene. In comes Disguised, picking up a lot of star players, right? Players who kind of need another chance, or, maybe they were kind of held back for age requirements and other reasons. I mean, they're picking up some star players. They put them together, a little bit of a roster change going to Split 2, and now they have a shot at being another MYSG team that's leading the pack. So let's meet the players. So Vera is your primary duelist, right? Playing the Jet mainly, right? That's oftentimes what makes someone a primary duelist in a lot of the metas in Valorant. And Vera is a name that's been around for a very long time, since pretty much the beginning of APAC Valorant. And Vera has oftentimes been brought up as this player who just has amazing talent, and you can see it a lot of the times. But then sometimes, in maybe some of these important matches, or, on certain rosters, where maybe just some things aren't gelling correctly, Vera isn't able to always be putting up the best numbers, right? And that's something that's maybe held Vera back a little bit. This is one of those players where I'm always told a lot of the times, like, this is a player you want to watch out for. It puts up great games, puts up great numbers. And I look through it and I'm like, okay, yeah, I see that. And then I watch certain games, on the bigger stages or in the more important stages, and I'm like, well, either he's getting targeted a lot, he's not able to really kind of be that player who's like, no matter what happens, I'm breaking through and I'm carrying this team no matter what. So it's one of those cases of, okay, like, he needs another chance, he needs another roster. Well, now Vera's getting that roster. Vera's one of the members that was actually brought on in Split 2, as he was actually one of the players that was kind of holding Disguised back in Split 1. He was playing on another organization, or another team rather, called Orgulus, and they actually won Split 1. And Disguised, takes the motto by heart, apparently, where it says, if you can't beat them, well, make them join you. Not sure that's how the scene goes, but that's what happens here. Vera gets picked up on Split 2, and he helps carry this team over the finish line. Next up, what's better than first duelist is second duelist, right? So Juicy continue to play this duelist role for this team, but being the secondary duelist. And when I say secondary duelist, I mean secondary duelist. All he's also played throughout Split 2 is duelist. Like, we're not talking like flex, but sometimes plays the raise and things like that. We're talking like he's playing straight up just duelist. Like, this team plays double duelist on every single map, something we'll get to in a little bit. But Juicy was, of course, the primary duelist last year for Revenant Esports when they won Ascension, so he's got experience at the Ascension stage. Even then, he was a very, very reliable player, put up great numbers. Was in the top 3 in terms of just overall stats throughout Ascension last year, happening in Bangkok. Everyone said, look at this kid, he's young, he's got a bright future ahead of him. Well, now he gets another shot. Then you have Styron, another player that's brought on in Split 2, coming in as the IGL, used to play on Lays Gaming before that. So again, picking up some, some pieces here and there from the other teams. And Styron is playing pretty much strictly the initiators, but also IGLing. And Styron looks really solid as well. The calls are pretty good, but then in the clutch moments, the impact kills are even greater. Very promising talent. Then you have Wayne, one of the remaining members coming over from Split 1, playing that controller role. And, every now and then, he's the one that's kind of topping the board and making sure that if the duelists are either getting targeted or they're just kind of throwing themselves out there to get the entries, then Wayne's part of the crew that's picking up all the frags to make sure that they're actually getting the W on the board. And last but definitely not least, you have Grumble, who we're just going to say plays the Sentinel, obviously plays the Viper, who's kind of a Sentinel, but that just goes to show that, okay, he's playing the anchor, the lurking role a lot of the times. And Grumble puts up amazing numbers as well. In fact, just stays right behind Juicy in the grand finals when they beat their opponents 3-0, putting up a plus 24 kill death differential. So very, very reliable kind of last line of attack and defense. I know it sounds like I'm kind of glazing these players up, and I promise it's not because they're disguised. I mean, it's, first of all, pretty cool that Toast is continuing to try to get into the scene and support the scene and grow his own brand and the Valorant scene, so you love to see that. I was thrilled when I heard that, you know, Disguised was coming over to Pacific, but more than that, it's just the fact that these are all players that have individually been kind of proving themselves on different rosters, right? These are all players that within the region, people have kind of had their eyes on in terms of individual mechanics, but they weren't ever quite able to break through, whether it's, you know, where they were in their own career, whether it's the rosters they were in and the combinations, or whether it's just because Paper X used to exist in the scene back then and it was really hard to break through. I mean, whatever the reason is these are all players that it's very apparent now, looking at how they play on Disguised, that they deserved this extra chance to try to say, we want to get in to the higher level. One thing we will mention here before we get into the overall team story so far is the roles, right? So Duelist and Second Duelist. I love my Duelists, I do, but playing double Duelist on every single map in 2024, I mean, that is daring. But I'm not going to say too much because obviously, hey, they made it work. They made it work. And we'll get to that a little bit. But they did make it work. And it's not just purely like, herder, we're going to go in and frag out. That wasn't it. So I'm giving them credit here. But I will say this is maybe something to be concerned about a little bit. I am happy to see that it's not all double dive, though. That's a distinction we will have to put in. Obviously, Juicy playing a ton of that ISO. This is someone who used to pull out the Reyna whenever it was needed or whenever they couldn't figure out a different type of composition. It used to work out great for him then. The ISO is working out great for him now. He still pulls out the Reyna every now and then, so that's in his pocket. So that's a very reliable kind of second line trading duelist, whereas Vera is going to be kind of the dive duelist that opens up the site a lot of the times. And then otherwise, I mean, all very, very meta agents. So nothing too funky outside of the double duelist. So let's talk about the journey that Disguised took. And I know obviously there's a much deeper story here if you were to talk about it from like Disguised point of view, right? From Toast's point of view as an owner and this brand, because that roller coaster starts all the way back in the beginning of 2023. But we're not going to get into that. We're just going to talk about the team's performance and the road they took within 2024 in the MYSG region. Disguised comes in, qualifies for Split 1. It's looking great. The hype's behind him. Even in Split 1, the roster looks very individually talented. And it's looking pretty decent, right? They don't top the board in the group stage and the round robin stage in Split 1, but they're near the top, just 2 losses. Okay, you know, you kind of work out the kinks here, you iron things out, and maybe you can get into that position that a lot of fans are hoping you can, but you go into playoffs and right off the bat they get sent down to the lower bracket, and then they're not able to actually make the run back all the way to the grand finals, eventually losing to Orglis, the team that Vera and Grumble used to play on. Just not quite close enough for there to be objective faith that they're going to be able to make the run back in Split 2. But Disguised had other plans. They make big roster changes coming into Split 2, picking up a bunch of players from some of their opponents, like Vera and Grumble coming in from Orglis, the team that eventually wins Split 1, and then you pick out Styron from Lays Gaming as well, and now you're saying, okay, this is the complete form of Disguised, and it's looking pretty good. Although, listen, it wasn't without their hiccups as well. I mean, in the round 2, they actually had to have their head coach, Alex R, come in and play for a game because they had, you know, some connection issues for one of the players that couldn't join in. So it wasn't without the road bumps, but they get through it. Same record as Split 1, but okay, all right, still some hope to be had. Then they go into the playoffs of Split 2. And this time, the same mistake won't be made. This time, they get that 2-0 win against Lays, move on into the upper final, and then they go up against Elevate, the team that used to be Orglis, and they're able to get their revenge 2-1 in the upper finals, move on all the way to the grand finals. And 3-0 grand finals, a show of dominance in the match that matters the most for the entire year. And with that, Disguised is now in Ascension. We live in a universe where there is a chance that Disguised is going to have a team capsule next year. So, which players out of this talented pool do I think are going to be key to try to help Disguised make it all the way? I mean, all of them are so talented. You pick out any matches and you're going to see a different pool of players to really want to focus in on. But I am going to pick out Juicy and Vera. And I know maybe that sounds a little boring, right? 2-star duelist players on all the teams they've been on before, but there's a very good reason. So let's start with Juicy. A bit of a more obvious pick just from the story perspective, right? We've done this for a couple of players from other teams as well, but Juicy played at Ascension Pacific last year. And in fact, he was the champion of Ascension Pacific last year. He played on Bleed Esports. He had a chance to play in offline matches against the best teams of other regions, battle through it all, and lift a trophy. That has to count for something, right? That experience, that memory has to count for something. And if you can replicate that again, I mean, boy, is that a defining career characteristic. And I would say so far from the way he's playing right now on Disguised, he's poised to do so. He's playing things that really suit him as that secondary duelist, as someone who's saying, okay, I'm going to trade you out and make sure that whatever attack we're choosing, right, whatever way we choose to strike, that it's successful. So if Vera's not able to get through and get it all the way, I'm going to do it. I'm going to help make that way open up. And that's kind of how you have that role division. And while Juicy might have taken the spotlight specifically in the grand finals, when we talk about Vera, we have to give him respect because, as I've mentioned, you've already got a talented player in Juicy by your side, by your wings. And yet, Vera, he's able to really bring home the victory for his team by putting up consistently overall slightly better averages than Juicy as the primary duelist. So even though your team is set up to kind of take that pressure away from you, Vera is still there saying, well, listen, that's a great backup plan. I love that. But hey, I'm going to be that star duelist. I can make this happen for the team. And I mean, Disguise is going to love that, right? If you have this 1-2 punch of Juicy and Vera, or Vera and Juicy, I should say, I mean, it's going to be hard for teams to break through that. But what really caught my attention for Vera is his opping. In the last 2 matches of the playoffs, right? So the upper semis and the grand finals, Vera is using the op a ton, and he's successful with it. In the upper semifinals, a 2-1 victory for Disguised, Vera puts up 11 op kills, by far the most on this team. And this was a game where Juicy was actually picking up the op quite a bit himself as well, putting up 8 op kills himself. So this was split across the two, and Vera's still putting up 11. Then you have the finals, a 3-0 victory. All right, just remember this, only 3 maps played, and Vera puts up 19 op kills. 19. You know what that tells me? Sure, this team might be relying on the op quite a bit, but also it means that he has to be holding on to the op quite a bit because he's getting that many kills. So he's consistently, not only are they utilizing the op a lot, or they're trying to wait for it, they're relying on it as a part of their core plan, but he has to be successful to continuously get those op kills, because otherwise you kind of got to wait a couple other rounds because your econ might be shaky and whatever else. So 19 across 3 maps. Just to put this into perspective, let's take a look at some players at Champions that were known for their op play. Let's talk about Kong Kong. Yes, I know, compared to the past, he isn't as op heavy, but coming into Champions on EDG, people were still thrilled to see that he was happy to jump right back into the op. The grand finals at Champions, 5 maps. Kong Kong has 5 op kills. 5 across 5 maps. All right, okay, maybe the map pool, maybe the opponent, maybe things are a little different. Let's take a look at their upper finals against Leviathan. This one's looking a little bit better. This one's looking a little bit more like Kong Kong. He has 9 op kills across 3 maps. 9 op kills. All right, let's remember that. Okay, what about a player like Buzz, who looked like he was on a mission to prove to everyone that he was good enough to op at a world level, playing for DRX this year at Champions. I mean, this dude was putting up highlights nonstop on the op at that tournament. In the playoffs, they play against Trace Esports. It's a 2-0 victory. Across those 2 maps, Buzz has 6 op kills. Then let's take a look at their match against Fnatic. Another 2-0 victory. And this time, Buzz, all right, things are looking a little bit better. 12 op kills across the 2-0 victory. Okay, so this one's in condition because it's only 2 maps and he's putting up double digits. All right, that's pretty solid. Then let's take a look at their 2-1 victory against Crew. 3-map full best-of-3 series against Crew Esports for DRX. And here, he's back to 8 op kills. And just so we're clear about this, Abyss was played on all 3 of these maps, which is where DRX was playing very op heavy. So yes, okay, there's one map where, all right, Buzz might have been putting up maybe similar numbers if it went the full distance of the 3, although that's hard to quantify because that means they would have had to lose a map, and there's discussions to be had there. But, I mean, nothing close to the stats that we see from Vera in the last 2 games they played in the playoffs. So, to me, and you watch them play, and the moment they get the op, I mean, it kind of, a lot of their plans revolve around it. They're picking up the op oftentimes on the attacking side as well. It's just a very core part of Vera. It's a very core part of how Disguised plays Valorant. And it makes sense a little bit because they're playing double duelist. Double duelist means you're either lacking a lot of info, you're lacking a lot of stall, you're lacking something to really help set up the map in a better way on a macro level. What often fixes that? An op, especially on the defense, but even on the attack, right? If you are really confident in the operator, then that's going to start to open up certain things on the map where you can hold longer angles. You can try to get a long pick off, right off the get-go. That opens up a little bit more space for you to take, and it adds a lot of pressure against the enemy trying to peek you and gain information. I mean, this is a core part of their strategy. And to me, this matters a lot because now you're playing against teams who surely have seen this and are the best of their region. Do they have plans to fight against this operator? Maybe it's just a matter of trying to keep the econ kind of tied up against the sky so the operator can't come up that often. Or maybe it's a matter of, okay, well, we know what they do with the operator. Let's take it out of their hands immediately the moment it comes online. What is the sky's plan then? And can Vera maybe even say, well, it doesn't matter because I'm still going to get frags with it? Because then no one has an argument against double duelist on every map. Don't care. If your operator is that good, you deserve to win. Speaking of the operator and how you play the map, let's take a look at the map pool for Disguised. Well, right off the bat, Ascent, 100% win rate, 6-0 record so far, with an insane over 70%, 70 and over on both attack and defense. I mean, we were praising over 60% win rates on both sides previously. Now we're talking over 70? Over 70 across 6 games? Holy. There were some one-sided games here on Ascent for Disguise, but no matter what, that is a crazy statistic. What else do we know about Ascent? It is a very, very crucial map. Now, the rest of the map pool, not as dominant, right? All pretty good, but the Icebox may be looking a little shaky, 50-50 there across 6 games, so that's a pretty deep sample size, and it's not that dominant, although overall, the win rates on the attacking and defensive side come out to be positive, so it's not like this is a bad map for them. It's just not a dominant map for Disguised. And that would kind of make sense, because this is a map where you're trying to make the Ice or the Reyna work, in a way where it has to help win duels. Now, one thing obviously stands out is Sunset has been avoided by Disguise this entire split. So no records on Sunset. This is something they can weaponize against their opponents where they say, okay, well, now that we won, we have the time to bring in Sunset into the map pool and have a 7-map pool, which would be a huge boon. But if they don't, then the draft is going to be a little bit easier for their opponents. But really, I think the Ascent kind of having to be this band that teams have to be wary of is a huge boon, because then you still got maps like Bind and Lotus. And I would say maybe even the Haven could continue to grow as a pretty confident map here. Whether they play the Euro ISO again or not is a different question, because obviously that kind of takes away from the opportunities, right? The operator opportunities here on that map. But I think that map is still in contention for this team, and Icebox, they're willing to play on it with a 50-50, another op-centric map, not so bad. It's not the most dominant map we've seen, but it does have its strengths. But again, you have to remember, how do teams use this against them, or, maybe they fail to, when you take into account that it's double duelist on every map. It's very op-heavy on a lot of these maps. So Disguised. Coming into this, I think a lot of people want Disguise to be one of the favorites. And I've heard that a lot as well from fans who wanted to, hear my thoughts on Disguise. They're wondering, can they really be the favorites? And I came into this wondering myself, can this team really be the favorites? I mean, they're coming in from a pretty strong region. I know individually the roster's pretty stacked. And I know it wasn't necessarily an easy path when you take into the whole year in consideration. So they've had to battle through it. How do they really look? I mean, listen, I think they should be in the discussion for sure. But when you slowly climb up the higher chains, right, the higher tiers of competitive Valorant, things like, well, we play double duelist on every map, like that's our color. It can start to hold you back, right? There's a very, very direct comparison we can make to Paper X. Paper X, right? When they used to play in NYSG, right? Once Jing joined, okay, it's looking like Double Duelist works every time, everywhere. Then they come into VCT Pacific, it's still good enough everywhere. But the moment they get into internationals and the moment teams have seen it once or twice, it starts to hold you back a little bit. You know what to expect. You know how they play around it. You know where the weaknesses are. And you know they haven't figured that out yet because they're still, every time they change rosters or comps, it's still revolving around the idea of a Double Duelist. And so my question is can Disguised have more, do they have enough left in the tank to get through this? One thing I will give them credit for is that they do not just play W gaming. They don't just say, oh, Double Duelist, that means we can play aggressive everywhere all the time. That's not their strategy. In fact, I think they're pretty smart about knowing what the weaknesses are a lot of the times for their Double Duelist compositions and trying to use that as a prediction tool against their opponents, right? So a lot of times they'll also say, okay, well, you do have to play aggressive somewhere because you're lacking information, you're lacking stall. So they'll push out on defense, right? Try to make sure you're still holding a very aggressive 50% of the map, the rule of the diagonals, things like that. So there is an understanding here. They don't just go all in and say, hey, we fight as 3 to 5 every time and we just try to win duels every time. That's not the Disguised way. But again, there are limitations. So I think they're doing a very smart job of trying to work around it, but you can't avoid the fact that there are hard limitations. It's a very skewed composition to play on every single map. Now, the question is can other teams pressure them enough to break them out of the mold? And then the question returns to Disguise and saying, okay, whether you're getting uncomfortable or not, maybe you're just individually skilled enough to still battle through it, which I don't think has fully been tested yet with this roster. So I'm going to put them in the discussion. I don't think they're, a clear step above everybody else, but I would definitely say that this is a team you have to watch out for because, again, you might pressure them and they might just still swing back and knock you out. So that's going to be Disguised, representing NYSG, representing a very, very big hope for Toast as well. I mean, what a story it would be if they were able to make it all the way into VCT Pacific. And it's not a far-fetched idea. They have someone who's done it before. They have a very talented roster, and they're looking very, very stalwart in their idea of how to play to their individual strengths. I know there's a lot of people, whether you've been following these players, whether you're following Disguised as a brand, a lot of you out there have a lot of hope for this team. So let me know, what have you seen from this team? Let me know down in the comments below where you think they're going to land throughout Ascension Pacific. And now it's just a couple days away that we have to wait to find out how far the story of Disguised will go here in Pacific. That leaves us with one team, which is going to be our next video. It is going to be the team representing Japan, RIDDLE ORDER. I'll see you then.